Hi, my name is Adrian, and I have wanted to save the world for a very long time. I'm 42 years of age, and I have no formal education apart from stuff up to my 16th year, which was spent most of the time trying to emotionally fit in and missing out on much of what I was supposed to be learning anyway. I got into the idea of saving the world. I would say more in the late 90s. I was sitting with a friend. It was like I think it was about 12:30 at night, and BBC News 24 were running their regular thing. In those days, the when programming ended, they would just switch to the 24-hour news channel, and we were watching this, and they made an announcement that an iceberg had broken off from Antarctica, and it was 200 miles long, 100 miles wide, and it was going to take about 30 years to melt. And we just went, "What? That's really big." And yeah, I remember because it was like in the News 24 thing. I mean, you know what 24-hour news channels are like now. They're always repeating their headlines, aren't they? You can get like over and over again, and it's when something breaks, it gets interesting. So we just wanted to check the dimensions on that again. You know, it was very specific, and they didn't mention it again. It's like every half an hour there was no mention of that again. So this was the early days of internet cafes as well. So I went into an internet cafe a day or two later and got onto Yahoo search and typed in iceberg Antarctica breaking off or something along those lines. I was new to searching then, and what I found was a story from 2 years beforehand, which was that an iceberg had broken off from Antarctica, and it was 100 miles long and 50 miles wide, and had a German research laboratory still on it. So I just believe in global warming now. I mean, I just do. I mean, you can, sure, there are corporations and companies and money men, oligarchs, sort of characters who benefit from the way things are, and who would also make money from the World Bank funding some kind of like environmental rescue package for human civilization. I mean, there are people that would make money from that, but that doesn't mean that that's the only reason they're doing it, and it's a big con job. I mean, the thing is that they find out stuff about they find out stuff about oil all the time. I mean, and oil, fossil fuels in general, are burning the dead, isn't it? I mean, you know, fossil fuels is the remains of creatures, and we're burning the dead and putting it into our air, our atmosphere, our environment, our political environment, and you know, the climate is always changing, and climate change, I think, is just a bit of news that's very similar to the bit of news that evolution was, or the bit of news that the discovery the world was round. It's these sort of like fundamental paradigm shifts where the material world turns out to be counterintuitive. I mean, if you remember, you can't remember, but imagine what it was like in the early days. It must have been obvious that the world was flat and the sun travelled across the sky, and that, you know, then by way of people like Copernicus and what have you, through the scientific method, material reality started to become established, and we still talk about the sun coming up in the sky, and it doesn't, does it? The Earth rotates to meet it, right? So what I mean by this is that, okay, so we have to find out the world is round first, then we find out that things haven't always been the same. That's what the news of evolution was. Things change, as if we needed telling this. in some ways we do, things change, and then climate change means that the climate is changing, and so quite a lot of traditions, established traditions, rituals and what have you, if they are bound by the framing of previous paradigms, then they are also going through an evolutionary climate change, which is what brings me to what I think we need to do. I think we need to stop the fighting. That's it. That it's a 3-word notion. Stop the fighting. You can look at it however you want. I certainly don't imagine myself to be capable of doing this on my own. I've done a lot of groundwork of it on my own. What I mean by stop the fighting, I've mentioned the fossil fuel, I've mentioned the climate change, and I've mentioned the political climate, and I've touched on various subjects that establishment, tradition, oligarchical setups are all facing a challenge, and the challenge is not deliberate. The challenge has been discovered as existing, and if you are a person of peace and peace is your preference, I suggest that you're not in a minority. I think the fact that human civilization still continues, regardless of how many violent and nasty incidences occur, implies that the majority of the planet actually wants peace. And until we achieve it, I don't think we have democracy. That's my pitch for today. Stop the fighting.